Okay, and again, happy Halloween, everybody. With us right now, Max Maven stays on, and Loyd Auerbach is with us right now. This gentleman is a parapsychologist consultant. He's written a book which is called ESP, Hauntings and Poltergeists, a Parapsychologist's Handbook. Let's have a quick description, Loyd, if you will, of what is a parapsychologist, because they're not teaching that at Ramapo High School yet.
Right. Parapsychologist is someone who investigates or studies in the laboratory extrasensory perception, which is mind-to-mind communication or awareness of information at a distance. Also, mind over matter, which we call psychokinesis, and also the area we call survival of bodily death. That's the idea that the human mind might survive the death of the body.
It's an interesting idea. But we never really have a great deal of communication. One thinks today, particularly on Halloween, of Houdini, who really set up a methodology for trying to communicate from the dead, and there's really been no evidence that he's been able to do that.
That's right, and there hasn't been any good evidence, actually at all, that would prove conclusively that there's life after death. None whatsoever. It's very difficult to study scientifically because, of course, you have that final step, and there's no way to tell for sure until you take it, and I'm in no hurry.
What are you doing for Halloween?
I'm taking a walking haunted house tour of Lower Manhattan.
What qualifies a house for being on a tour like that? How do we know it's haunted?
That's a good question. I guess for this one, this is not something I'm putting together. It's something that someone else put together here in Manhattan, and I would guess it's folklore more than anything else, that there's stories about ghosts appearing in these houses.
What is it? Yeah, Max, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that I think you would agree, Lawrence, that although I certainly concur that there has been no substantial evidence to indicate that there are ghosts and so forth, that there are certainly phenomena that have been documented, which some people have ascribed to ghostly powers, and although that may not be the actual explanation, there are many things where there is no clear-cut, everyday, simple explanation.
A couple, I mean, obviously in the media we see things like the Amityville haunting and so forth.
Right.
What are some examples that you specifically have investigated that really defy a rational explanation?
Well, to defy...
Or worldly explanation.
Worldly explanation is probably a better choice. I had a 12-year-old boy outside the Bay Area in San Francisco who was communicating with the woman who had lived in the house that he moved into. He and his mother moved into a very old house. A woman had lived there by the name of Lucy for her entire life. And a year and a half after the boy started communicating, his mother found out that he was talking to Lucy. And she found out because he was coming up with facts about Lucy's early childhood, which the mother had to check out with the living brother. Wow. It was very interesting, but it was nothing frightening. As it happened, the boy had a friend to talk to, actually, and the mother was more concerned that he would grow up to be a normal kid than that he was having problems with a ghost.
Now, there are people who would say, well, there's no ghost involved in something like that. What you're really talking about in a situation like that is the collective consciousness. That somehow this information is in him, and it's in the genes somehow.
That's right, or perhaps that he was able to pick up the information from the house. We think about houses or objects as possibly recording events, especially emotional ones, and people might be able to decipher that. But the boy had a few questions for us from the ghost that were very pointed to the...
Like what, for example?
There were 3 questions, one for each of the 3 of us that were down there, and they were questions specific to a conversation we had had on the way down in the car that he could possibly not have known. Of course, we would say that the boy might have been psychic himself and could have picked up on what was in our minds at the time.
Just wondering quickly, parenthetically, what's the effect of something like this on a child?
In his case, he was perfectly all right about it. Apparently, the ghost was explaining that there was nothing wrong with it. She liked the house, which is why she was sticking around. And since he discovered girls, he has stopped talking to Lucy so much.
Now he's talking to real life
girls, that's right.
What are some of the actual disguises that psychic phenomena can take, like a water gushing up? I mean...
There were a couple interesting cases a colleague of mine investigated in England, poltergeist cases, which are typically related to living people, not ghosts.
Yes.
The subconscious is doing something. And in one case, a young girl had water drenching her constantly from nowhere, actually drenching her grandparents who were with her at the time.
And wait, you mean like they're walking down the street and there's water is coming down her like
they're in the house and suddenly they're soaking wet, or water would appear mysteriously in their dresser drawers. But typically, yeah, it would be kind of like a Three Stooges routine. But the water isn't coming from anywhere. In that case, the girl's parents had just died in an auto accident. She hadn't cried once during that entire time. She didn't suffer any grief. And by looking at that as a dream sequence, that in a dream the water would symbolize grief, it was understood that this was probably what was going on, that she was somehow creating the water to come up to symbolize her grief, and as soon as she let that out, it stopped right away.
Fascinating. Now, what I really should have said when I was introducing our guest is that this man is like a real-life Ghostbuster.
Right.
You actually do get hired to come into situations when there is some weird stuff going on in the house. So, Loyd, tell us briefly, what has been the effect on your business of the movie Ghostbusters?
Well, when Ghostbusters first came out, it was probably the best thing that happened to the field of parapsychology, because people like you and shows like this were stopping from asking things like, show us a house like Amityville, and instead they're saying, what do you really do, and how does this stuff really show up? They don't expect that we're going to run into Marshmallow Men walking down Central Park West.
Have you ever been slimed?
Never. And I hope never to be at all.
Max, how do you get into this area
I have
at all?
done some work in this area, and in fact, the story you just told about the woman producing, the young lady producing water, is very interesting. You know that 50 years ago, on the 10th anniversary of Houdini's death, which Bill just mentioned, they conducted the 10th annual seance to contact Houdini, the last one that was officially sanctioned by Houdini's wife. And they got that night a manifestation of sorts, which is that they had a sudden rain shower for 10 or 15 minutes. Right. That is at least the legend. And in California, we don't get sudden rain showers for 10 minutes.
That's right.
And this is quite a famous manifestation. Well, 5 years ago, I conducted a Halloween seance, a legit one, in the Hollywood Hills, near to the outdoor place where this one 50 years ago was conducted. And we had a mist descend onto the seance area, a very tangible mist, and again, this is water, for a 15, 20-minute period during the seance. I have no idea how or why this happened, because it was a clear night, and it went away as quickly as it had come. The next night, I spoke to a friend of mine, Patrick Culleton, who is a Houdini expert. He has lectured around the country on Houdini's biographical information. And I described the story to him. I said, we almost got the rain shower, and he went white. Because he said that, in fact, although the rain shower story is the popular version, the true manifestation had been exactly that, a mist. Now, I'm not going to say that that mist was the manifestation of the spirit of Harry Houdini. Clearly, that would not be something we could prove or...
That's right. That is...
Another manifestation.
Yeah. You know, every once in a while, some of these things occur, and on Halloween, you never know what's going to happen in the studio. Why don't we jump up to some questions in the audience from our Ramapo students, okay? First up, hi, what's your name?
My name's Karen.
Hi, what's it say on your shirt there?
It says, Jesus midat sifumt.
Oh, figures. Okay, what's your question?
It's for Mr. Maven. I was wondering, is the gift of mind reading, is that something that you can acquire by years of study, or is it just something you're born with?
It is a good question. I think everybody has a great deal of skill in the area of nonverbal communication, intuition, and the ability to communicate with other people in ways that we might term paranormal, beyond everyday. And these need to be exercised the same way as muscles do. No. I have, I suppose, in my body the potential to do gymnastics, but I certainly couldn't do them now if you asked me.
You have worked on mental exercise. I know I mentioned recently on the show that I went to this seminar on neuro-linguistic programming that's done by this fellow Anthony Robbins, who walks across the coals, and that's what they're really teaching. They're teaching you how to communicate non-verbally and how to influence people if you want, like the way you're both moving your head, just like that. I got you to do that. Let's go to next up for a question. Hi. Step right up. What's your name?
Beth.
Okay, Beth, very loud so we can hear you. What's your question, please?
Okay, this could be directed to anybody. I would like to know what's the criteria you use for exploring these cases of whatever, poltergeists and ghosts.
Okay, well, you're a scientist.
Okay.
You hear a poltergeist thing. What's the criteria that surrounds the going and investigating?
We look at several things before we go out and investigate. One of them is if it's current, if it's still going on. It doesn't. It's nice to hear a story about a ghost that appeared in someone's house 10 years ago, but unless it's current, it doesn't help. Another is that there are witnesses that are around, because one person may actually see something, but it's very difficult to pin down without any corroborating information, or even the other side of the story, what might be going on. And the third thing really is, preferably if there's physical evidence, something like a poltergeist case where you have objects possibly moving around, that's something we might be able to see. Whereas in typical apparition ghost cases, we don't typically, when we walk in, see anything that's happening. So that's the first thing we have to do, is determine whether we can actually go in and see anything.
Very interesting. We could go on and on about this. I want to show your book is ESP, Hauntings and Poltergeists. Loyd Auerbach and Max Maven is going to be at Caroline's tonight. I wonder what the second show is going to be like there.
I think it's going to be kind of spooky.
All right, we'll be back right after this. Thank you, gentlemen. Sorry we didn't get the rest of your questions.